Most men spend their entire lives trying to add things. More discipline, more habits, more routines, more systems. They believe that the man they want to become is on the other side of something they have not yet acquired. Marcus Aurelius understood something different. The man he became was not built by adding. It was built by eliminating, by identifying, one by one, the behaviors and patterns that were costing him more than they were giving him, and quietly, without announcement, without explanation, stopping them. Not because someone told him to, not because he read it in a book, because he was honest enough with himself to see what was actually draining him, and disciplined enough to stop once he saw it. In the next minutes, you are going to learn 7 things Marcus Aurelius quietly stopped doing. Not because they were obviously destructive. Most of them looked completely normal from the outside. But each one was carrying a hidden cost. A cost measured not in time or money, but in clarity, composure, and the kind of energy a man needs to carry what actually matters. Before we go further, one thing you need to understand. These 7 things are connected. Each one you eliminate makes the next one easier to see. If you jump ahead looking for the one that applies to you, you will miss the architecture underneath. Stay with all 7. The pattern only becomes visible when you see them together. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with how much you have worked. You know it. You have felt it. You get to the end of a day, and you cannot point to anything that went catastrophically wrong. The meetings happened, the decisions got made, the conversations had, and yet you feel emptied out in a way that sleep does not fully fix. That exhaustion is not physical. It is the result of spending energy on things that were never yours to spend it on. Defending your position to people who were never going to change their minds. Explaining yourself to people who were not actually asking. Managing the emotional temperature of situations you did not create and cannot resolve. Carl Jung spent decades studying what happens to a man when he lives in constant reaction to the world around him, instead of from a stable center within himself. He called it the loss of the self to the persona. The man stops being himself and starts being whatever each situation requires him to be. And the longer that goes on, the harder it becomes to remember what the original self actually looked like. Marcus Aurelius faced this same pull every single day. As emperor, every person around him had a version of him they needed. His generals needed a commander. His senators needed a statesman. His enemies needed a target. His people needed a symbol. And beneath all of those projections was a man who had to work deliberately and daily to remain himself. The way he did it was not by adding armor. It was by removing weight, by identifying the behaviors that were pulling him away from his own center and eliminating them one by one. Not with drama, not with announcements, quietly, because the man who has truly decided to change something does not need an audience for that decision. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Here is what I want you to hold before we go into the 7 things. Every behavior on this list is going to feel familiar, not because you are failing, but because these are patterns that most men carry without ever questioning them. The question is not whether you recognize them. The question is whether you are willing to do what Marcus Aurelius did and quietly stop. Thing number 1. He stopped seeking approval from people he did not respect. This one is subtle because it does not always look like seeking approval. Sometimes it looks like explaining yourself. Sometimes it looks like defending a decision that did not require defense. Sometimes it looks like staying longer than necessary in a conversation just to make sure the other person does not walk away with a negative impression of you. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal that he had to regularly remind himself not to waste time worrying about what others thought of him. not because he was arrogant, but because he recognized that the need for approval from people whose judgment he did not actually value was one of the most expensive habits a man can have. Think about how much energy goes into managing perceptions, the careful wording of messages, the second-guessing of decisions after they have been made, the replaying of conversations to assess how they landed. All of that energy spent in the court of opinion, of people whose verdict you would not accept anyway. Seneca wrote that a man who is always performing for an audience never gets to rest, because the performance never ends. There is always another room, another conversation, another impression to manage. And the man who has tied his sense of worth to how he is perceived will spend his entire life in that exhausting loop. When Marcus Aurelius stopped needing the approval of people he did not respect, something specific happened. He stopped editing himself before he was necessary. He stopped defending positions that were already sound. He stopped explaining decisions that did not require explanation. And the energy that had been going into all of that went back to him. It is the sign of a weak mind to be unable to bear wealth. Thing number 2. He stopped explaining himself when he owed no explanation. There is a difference between communication and justification. Communication serves the relationship. Justification serves the ego. It is the need to make sure the other person understands not just what you decided, but why, and that the why was good enough, and that you were not wrong to decide it. Most men do not notice how much of their daily conversation is actually justification. The email that ends with 3 extra paragraphs defending a perfectly reasonable request. The decision explained in detail to someone who did not ask. The boundary stated and then immediately softened with an excuse because the silence after it felt like disapproval. Marcus Aurelius understood that the need to justify is rooted in insecurity. A man who is certain of the quality of his actions does not need the world to confirm them. He acts, he moves on. The action speaks for itself, or it does not. But either way, he is already doing the next right thing. The Stoic teacher, whose life was defined by what cannot be taken from a man, taught that freedom begins the moment you stop requiring others to validate your choices. You can choose well without being understood. You can act with integrity without being recognized for it. And once you accept that, the compulsion to explain dissolves. Thing number 3 is the one that most men resist the most, not because they disagree with it, but because it asks something of them in real time, in the actual moment of provocation. That is harder than anything a philosophy book can prepare you for. Stay with me. Thing number 3. He stopped reacting to every provocation as if it were a real threat. The human nervous system cannot tell the difference between a physical threat and a social one. When someone challenges your judgment in a meeting, when someone dismisses your work, when someone speaks to you in a tone that signals disrespect, your body responds the same way it would if you were facing actual danger. Heart rate rises, jaw tightens, the thinking brain starts to go offline. Marcus Aurelius knew this. He wrote about it repeatedly. The man who reacts to every provocation has handed control of himself to whoever provokes him. He is not directing his own life. He is being directed by the moods and behaviors of everyone around him. But here is what Marcus Aurelius understood that most men miss. Stopping the reaction does not mean feeling nothing. It means creating space between the feeling and the response. It means recognizing that the anger rising in your chest is information, not a command, and that you have a choice about what to do with it. Write in the comments right now the one situation where you find this hardest. One word. That is the thing that still has the most power over you. The man who has mastered this does not become cold. He becomes deliberate. He still feels the provocation. He still notices the disrespect, but he chooses his response from a place of clarity, rather than having it chosen for him by the heat of the moment. How much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes of it? Thing number 4. He stopped carrying guilt that did not belong to him. This one is particularly heavy for men who take their responsibilities seriously, because the men who care the most are also the men most vulnerable to absorbing blame for things they did not cause and could not have prevented. A project fails, and the man who led it replays every decision looking for where he went wrong, even when the outcome was shaped by factors entirely outside his control. A relationship deteriorates, and the man who tried hardest asks himself what he should have done differently, even when the other person's choices were the ones that mattered. A child struggles, and the father wonders where he failed, even when he gave everything he had. Marcus Aurelius lost children. He watched people he trusted betray him. He made decisions that cost lives, and he had to learn, repeatedly and deliberately, to distinguish between genuine accountability and borrowed guilt. To ask honestly, did I act well with what I knew and what I had? If the answer was yes, the outcome was not his to carry. Epictetus taught that a man who takes responsibility for what is not his has voluntarily made himself a slave to things he cannot change. True accountability means owning your actions and your choices. It does not mean owning the unpredictable, the uncontrollable, or the choices of other people. When Marcus Aurelius stopped carrying guilt that was not his, he did not become less responsible. He became more effective, because he was no longer spending his energy on what could not be changed and could direct it entirely toward what still could. Thing number 5. He stopped talking more than necessary. Silence is uncomfortable for most men because it has been misread as absence, as if the man who speaks less has less to say, less confidence, less presence, when the opposite is almost always true. Marcus Aurelius observed that most conversation fills space rather than serving a purpose. Words spoken to appear knowledgeable, words spoken to ease tension that would resolve itself, words spoken because the silence felt like it needed to be managed. Seneca wrote that we should speak only when what we are about to say is better than the silence we would be replacing. That standard, applied honestly, eliminates a significant portion of what most men say in a given day, not because they have nothing valuable to offer, but because much of what they say is not about value. It is about comfort, their own comfort with the silence. When Marcus Aurelius stopped filling space with words, something shifted in how people received the words he did use. The man who speaks selectively and with intention carries a different weight than the man who speaks freely and often. The first is listened to. The second is heard, but not necessarily absorbed. This is not about becoming someone who does not engage. It is about learning to ask before speaking. Does this need to be said? Does it need to be said now? And does it need to be said by me? Thing number 6. He stopped expecting gratitude for what he did. This is one of the quietest forms of suffering a man can carry. Not dramatic, not obvious, just the persistent, low-level disappointment of effort that goes unacknowledged. Work given fully and not recognized. Sacrifices made and taken for granted. A contribution that seems invisible to the people it was meant to serve. Marcus Aurelius wrote explicitly about this. He noted that a man who acts well and then waits for recognition has misunderstood the nature of virtue. The reward for acting well is having acted well. The outcome, the recognition, the gratitude, those are external. They may come, or they may not. But they were never the point. This is not resignation. It is liberation. The man who acts without requiring gratitude is free to keep acting at full capacity, regardless of how the world responds. The man who acts and waits for acknowledgement is hostage to everyone around him. His energy is conditional, and that conditionality is felt by everyone who depends on him. When Marcus Aurelius stopped expecting gratitude, his giving became genuinely unconditional, not because he did not care, but because he had relocated the measure of his actions from other people's responses to his own standard of conduct. Thing number 7. He stopped resisting what he could not change. This is perhaps the most well-known Stoic principle, and it is also the one most consistently misapplied, because accepting what cannot be changed is not the same as being passive about what can. The man who has genuinely internalized this principle is not the man who shrugs at difficulty. He is the man who does not waste a single unit of energy fighting reality. Marcus Aurelius faced losses he could not prevent, betrayals he could not have anticipated, outcomes that went against every reasonable expectation. And each time, after the initial impact, he returned to the same question. Given that this is now true, what is the best thing I can do next? That question is not resignation. It is the most efficient possible use of a man's energy. Because the alternative, spending time and attention arguing with what has already happened, produces nothing. It changes nothing. It costs everything. Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together. When Marcus Aurelius stopped resisting what he could not change, he did not become someone who accepted everything without response. He became someone who responded only to what was actually within his reach. And that focus, applied consistently, is what allows a man to move through difficulty without being stopped by it. 7 things, each one a weight that Marcus Aurelius identified and quietly set down, not in a single dramatic moment of transformation, but through the daily private practice of asking one question before he reacted, explained, justified, or complained. Is this mine to carry? If the answer was no, he let it go. If the answer was yes, he carried it fully without complaint and without requiring anyone to recognize the weight. That question, applied honestly to your own life, will show you quickly which of these 7 things you are still holding. Not because you are weak, but because no one ever gave you permission to set them down. You have it now. Starting today, pick one of the 7. The one that costs you the most. The one that you recognized immediately when you heard it. And for the next 7 days, every time you feel the pull toward that behavior, pause for one breath and ask yourself whether Marcus Aurelius would recognize it as necessary. You will be surprised how rarely the answer is yes. If this kind of work is what you are here for, this channel publishes one new video every week. Every video goes deeper than the last. Subscribe so you do not miss what comes next.